So just this week, there's a pretty big development. A federal judge ordered the release of, what, $11.5 billion in foreign aid?
That's right. Funds the administration had tried to hold back. And it's really sparked this constitutional question about spending power.
Right, who actually controls the purse strings. But at the same time, we're seeing these other just massive numbers. Our sources point to ICE getting, is it up to $170 billion?
It is, over just 4 years, which is, I mean, it's more than the entire U.S. Marine Corps budget.
Wow. More than the Marines. And almost as much as Canada's whole military spend.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
These aren't just numbers on a page. They represent really significant decisions about, well, our borders, the economy, our future direction.
Yeah, these figures really highlight how intense this whole national conversation around immigration and enforcement has become.
Exactly. The judge's ruling on the aid, this huge ICE budget, they aren't separate things. They're symptoms, really, of these deep, often conflicting concerns people have. Security, the economy, how government works.
It's definitely complex, lots of different viewpoints, lots of resources involved.
Absolutely. It's a very charged landscape right now.
So, from soaring enforcement budgets to these court battles over aid, it feels like the headlines on immigration are really shaping things fast. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to try and unravel some of these recent developments. We'll look at the different perspectives driving policy, the huge expansion in enforcement, and these big fights over government spending.
Yeah, our goal here is really to cut through some of the noise. We want to examine the concerns people have, look at the economic impacts, what people think they are, and what they might actually be, and the political strategies in play. And everything we talk about today is drawn straight from the sources you've provided. So hopefully by the end, you'll have a clearer picture of what's happening, why it's so contentious, and what it means for you.
Okay, let's unpack this then. When people talk about their concerns regarding immigration, our sources show some key issues keep coming up. What are those main drivers we need to understand?
Well, looking across the sources, the concerns are pretty consistent. First, there's a really strong focus on illegal immigration and border security. You see this constant call for cracking down on unauthorized crossings. It gets a lot of attention.
Right, that seems to be the dominant image often.
It is. But what's interesting and often missed is that visa overstays. They actually account for about half of the illegal presence in the U.S.
Half. So it's not just the physical border itself.
Exactly. It means border security is broader. It involves managing visas, internal enforcement. It's not solely about, say, the southern border wall narrative. That's a crucial detail the sources highlight.
That really does shift the perspective. And what about the economic worries? Those feel like a really strong current in the debate.
Oh, definitely. Economic pressures are huge. You constantly hear worries about immigrants competing for jobs.
Like the example in the sources about tech workers in the Bay Area.
Precisely. That perception exists that they're taking good jobs from citizens. But the sources also present a different side. Many argue immigrants often take jobs that native-born workers tend to avoid, thinking agriculture, construction, or they drive innovation, start businesses,
Yeah.
which helps the economy overall.
So a more complex picture than just direct competition.
Very much so, and that complexity often gets lost. Then there's housing. The sources mention concern that more immigration pushes up housing costs because of demand, especially with limited supply.
And not just in big cities, right? Places like Springfield, Ohio were mentioned.
Exactly. It's seen as affecting smaller communities too. Although it's also worth noting immigrants are often working in construction, so they're contributing to supply as well. Is another one of those complex dynamics.
Okay, so jobs, housing. What about the idea of strain on public services? Does that come up?
Yes, that's another recurring theme. The sentiment that some immigrants might freeload on welfare or put too much pressure on schools and healthcare. That concern about the cost to taxpayers is definitely there in the sources.
And beyond the purely economic.
Right, there are cultural and sometimes nativist sentiments. The sources mention things like, well, foreign flags at demonstrations or language barriers needing more translators. These can spark what some, even former President Obama noted, called patriotic resentment.
Kind of symbolic issues, but they clearly resonate.
They do. They're sometimes called low-hanging fruit issues, maybe not central to policy, but they impact public feeling. There's also some debate mentioned about linking immigration to crime or antisocial behavior, suggesting a crackdown might improve perceptions.
Like the broken window theory idea.
Exactly. That's the comparison critics draw. They worry that focusing on minor issues leads to discriminatory policing and ignores deeper social problems. So lots of layers to these concerns.
Okay, so given all those concerns, security, economy, culture, it kind of leads into the next point. The massive funding boost for enforcement we mentioned earlier, those numbers are just huge.
They really are eye-opening. It seems this big appropriations bill, what some sources are calling a big gross bill because it covers so much, has given ICE, well, between $150 and potentially $170 billion, just over 4 years.
And compared to the Marines budget or Canada's military,
Yeah.
it's just staggering. What is all that money for?
Well, the sources indicate it's earmarked for several key things, primarily massive deportation operations. The goal seems to be ramping up the scale and speed of removals.
How? Like, what does that involve?
It involves buying new vehicles, more surveillance tech, equipment, all to support what the sources term shock and awe operations. Think highly visible, rapid enforcement actions.
Okay. And detention.
Yes, a huge chunk, tens of billions, is specifically for building and maintaining detention centers, both expanding existing ones and building new ones, significantly increasing the capacity to hold migrants.
It's worth remembering, though, this isn't entirely new, is it? Increasing ICE's budget.
That's a fair point. The sources do note that previous administrations, both Republican and Democrat, including President Obama, who actually deported record numbers, and President Biden, have increased ICE funding and enforcement.
So the trend isn't new, but the scale now is.
Unprecedented, exactly. The sheer size of this current allocation seems to mark a significant jump.
Which naturally leads to concerns. What are the main worries highlighted in the sources about giving an agency this much funding and power?
Well, this raises some pretty fundamental questions about ICE's role. There are serious concerns voiced in the sources that this level of funding, potentially combined with certain executive directives, could risk turning ICE into something like a flicka. Well, the terms used are stark, like secret police or even Gestapo.
That's strong language. What's the fear behind that?
The fear, according to these sources, is an agency becoming excessively loyal to the executive branch, potentially operating with hugely expanded powers and less oversight. That it could be used to target political opponents, critics, maybe even citizens, without proper due process.
Wow. Are there specific examples mentioned?
There are allegations cited that ICE might already be detaining legal residents or even citizens accidentally while trying to meet perceived quotas or targets. The underlying concern is about a powerful, heavily funded agency potentially operating with impunity and extending its reach beyond just immigration, possibly impacting civil liberties more broadly.
Okay, that potential for overreach is clearly a major red flag raised in the sources. So, given this massive investment and the political heat, how are the parties handling this? How are Republicans and Democrats approaching this whole complex mess?
Well, the political landscape is definitely polarized. Our sources paint Republicans as generally having a very hard-line position. Think deporting those here legally, the border wall, policies like remain in Mexico.
Which requires asylum seekers to wait outside the U.S.
Correct. This consistent stance plays into a strong security narrative. It's often seen by supporters as being effective signaling, showing they're tough on the issue, trustworthy on sovereignty and order.
And the Democrats. They seem to be in a tougher spot, according to the sources.
That's certainly the picture painted. They face criticism for sort of either dodging the issue or sometimes sounding like they're adopting Republican talking points. This can apparently lead to confusion among voters or perceptions of a hidden agenda.
And things like the "no human being is illegal" slogan.
Sources suggest the kind of rhetoric prominent post-Trump is now viewed by some within the party as a political liability, an albatross, making it harder to connect with a wider range of voters.
It's interesting how the acceptable range of debate, the Overton window, shifted.
Absolutely. The sources point to a significant shift towards more anti-immigrant sentiment becoming mainstream around 2019, and especially during the Biden administration, often linked to perceptions of border mismanagement and the visible increase in crossings. It's made it really tricky for Democrats to find a message that works for both their base and more moderate voters.
So with these divides, are there any compromise ideas floating around in the sources? Any potential paths forward?
There is a recurring idea. It's this notion of a combined strategy. Be really tough and clear about cracking down on illegal immigration, but at the same time, make legal immigration much easier and more efficient.
So stricter enforcement, but wider legal doors.
Kind of. It's often paired with rhetoric about assimilation. Assimilation good, speak English, do it legally. This approach, the sources note, has worked well for parties in places like Canada and Australia.
How so?
They managed to build public support for more immigration by framing it as orderly, controlled, and economically beneficial. The argument is, While voters might react more to simpler security-focused messages, the economic case for legal immigration is incredibly strong.
And economists support that?
Yes, many economists, even conservative ones like Milton Friedman cited in the materials, strongly argue for expanded legal pathways.
Hmm.
It demonstrably helps the economy, expands the tax base, which helps with national debt, boosts productivity, and can even help manage inflation by increasing labor supply.
A really interesting potential balance there. Security focus plus economic leveraging.
Okay, shifting slightly. Beyond our borders, there was that big court fight over foreign aid you mentioned at the start. That touches on similar themes of spending and power, right?
Exactly. It's another piece of this puzzle about government power and money. So, President Trump tried to withhold $11.5 billion in foreign aid that Congress had already approved.
And a big chunk of that was for global health.
Yes, nearly $5 billion for global health programs. He used this tactic called a pocket rescission, basically, the White House just refusing to spend money Congress allocated, often by letting the deadline pass. The justification was it didn't fit America First priorities.
So Congress says spend, the president says no. How did the courts react?
Well, U.S. District Judge Amir Ali stepped in very clearly. He ruled, just recently on September 3rd, that withholding those funds was likely illegal. He issued an injunction ordering the money released immediately.
What was his reasoning? He stressed that while the administration has leeway in how it spends appropriated funds, it doesn't get to decide whether to spend them at all. He forcefully restated that only Congress controls the power of the purse.
A fundamental constitutional point.
Absolutely. It's about checks and balances, preventing the executive from just defunding things they don't like if Congress has lawfully provided the money.
Is that the end of it, or is this fight continuing?
No, the administration immediately appealed, so the tension is still very much alive. The funds were due to expire soon, so the judge's timing was crucial. The appeal outcome will be really important for defining future presidential power over budgets.
Wow. Okay, so it's really clear immigration isn't just one issue. It connects deeply to the economy, public services, even these fundamental battles over government power and spending.
Definitely. We've seen today the wide range of concerns driving the debate: security, jobs, culture. We've seen the absolutely enormous funding now going into enforcement, reshaping agencies like ICE.
And the really tricky political messaging everyone's grappling with, plus these big constitutional questions about who controls the money.
Exactly. All these pieces are interconnected.
So wherever you stand personally on these issues, hopefully understanding these different parts, the concerns, the money, the politics, the legal fights, helps you see the true stakes involved. It's not just abstract policy.
Right. And it leaves us with a really challenging question, doesn't it? When you consider this immense funding for enforcement, alongside the ongoing arguments about the best legal immigration pathways and these power struggles over spending, how do we, as a country, actually find the right balance? A balance between securing borders, creating an immigration system that genuinely benefits our economy, and staying true to our constitutional principles and values. That's the core challenge.
That is definitely a powerful question to think about as all of this continues to develop. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive today.